All right, let's get a little more into the hybrid picking techniques most closely associated with country-style chicken picking guitar. And in these next bunch of licks, I'm going to be playing notes on the G string and on the D string using the pick, but notes on the higher string picked with the finger. Here's the first lick. All right, this lick is in the key of E, and I'm starting by sliding from the 3rd fret to the 4th fret up on the G string, and that is picked using the pick, but the high E string is continually picked with the finger. And then I let the strings ring into each other. So the second time, I come down, first time just comes down, straight down, and then second time it's a little more complicated. So as I say, the pick is going to strike the G string, and I'm using the ring finger to pick the high E string. So it's important to keep those strings ringing. Because you hear this stuff in banjo playing, and that's what inspired this type of stuff on guitar, and you also hear it in bluegrass guitar playing. A technique that a lot of country guitar players borrowed from banjo players is something known as a banjo roll, and there's different ways to do this. It's a right-hand picking technique, and you can either pick repeatedly with your fingers with a different finger designated to each string, or you can use a raking technique with the thumb. I'm going to show you that first. All right, so I begin with that quick slide up from the 3rd to the 4th fret on the G string. And I let the top 3 strings ring throughout. And the way I'm executing it with the right hand is to use the thumb for the G and the B string, so it sort of rakes across. And then I use the ring finger for the high E string. And at the end here, I'm going to pick the low E string with the thumb, and then pull off to the open low E string, pick the D string at the 2nd fret, that E note with the thumb, and pick the open high E with the ring finger. So you have 3 E notes ringing out. You could also use the pick in a similar way, where the pick is going to rake across. Or we could use all finger picking and have the thumb pick the G string, the middle finger pick the B string, and the ring finger pick the high E string. The reason for this is because I'm holding the pick with my index finger. And that's how banjo players would do it. They're going to roll those fingers. And that's why it's called a banjo roll. Now, many country guitar players use a thumb pick, and that really takes them one step closer to banjo players who use all finger picks. Or they'll use a thumb pick and finger picks together, so they can really get that right hand independence and the rolling sound, strings ringing into each other. That said, so many country guitar players will use a flat pick and then use that combination, what's known as hybrid picking, where you'll pick the lower strings with the flat pick and higher strings with the fingers. All right, let's take this lick that we were just doing, which was in the key of E, and we'll move it to a closed position so you can get a similar sound without using the open strings. So this is going to be played in the key of A. Here we go. All right, this riff is based on A minor pentatonic. And just as we had done in the key of E, we begin on the G string by having the fourth go up to the fifth. In the key of E, fourth to the fifth, or sharp four to the fifth, we did like that. But to do it in a closed position, we're going to bend the string. We're going to bend that D note up to E, the fourth of A, up to the fifth of A. And I repeatedly. So now, to sound a high root note on the E string, I have to fret. So fifth fret of the high E string, that's A. And likewise, I'm using the pick on the G string, and I'm using the finger on the high E string. So you bend up a whole step on the G string and then let that continue to ring while you pick the high E. And then I'm going to come down. So it's pre-bend, and then I pull off. And the last time, I just come straight down the scale. And I do a little half-step bend from G sharp to A. All right, the technique of where you have a note bent on one string, played in tandem with an unbent note on another string, is known as oblique bending, and that's a big part of country guitar style. So let me show you a few more oblique bending licks. All right, this lick is based on A major hexatonic. That's going straight up the scale, so it's like A major pentatonic. But we have the fourth in there also. And I begin with an oblique bend. To remind you, you have one string bent along with one string that's fretted normally. So I start by bending the 12th fret of the B string up a whole step, played against 12th string on the 12th fret on the high E string. But after I go back to the B string, I'm going to move down to the 10th fret while I'm still holding that bend. So you get that little bit of dissonance between the sound of the C sharp and the D that's only a half step away. So it takes some strength to keep that bend up to pitch. Then the second time, while holding that bend, I'm going to change the note on the high E string. So I'm always going back and forth between the two strings. So you start talking about the high E string. We're going to start on the 12th fret, 14th, 12th, 10th, and then release the bend. All right, let's do a few more oblique bend licks, and I'm going to change the note on the high E string like we had done. And when we did our first lick in A minor pentatonic down here, we had a high root note on the E string. Now we're going to change that note to a C. I'll show you a couple licks like that. Here we go. So one of the techniques I used in this lick is I have an unbent 7th fret of the G string, and then it's bent. What I do is I alternate between the sound of it unbent and then pick bent with picking it and bending it together. And this is all played against that high C note, 8th fret of the high E string, that's fretted the whole time. So what I'm doing, just alternating between the sound of and, because it sounds nice to switch. And then when you come down the second time, you've got that G string pre-bend. So it's releasing the bend, pulling off. And then the second time, I just make that a little bit faster. And then the last time, I come down the blues scale. And then bring that major third back in, which is a big part of the country sound, that sound of the major third. Another technique common to country guitar players is to take a lick and then move it through the chord changes and play it on each chord. This is something that bluegrass players do also, and jazz players do, of course, make direct reference to the chord. And it's just a cool way to take a lick and then make a theme out of it by playing it across a series of chord changes. I'll show you what I mean. All right, this lick is based on taking the blues scale and moving it from A to C to D to E. And over each chord, I'm going to use that scale relative to the specific chord. So I start with the A blues scale, and I play. So I got a little chromaticism here. Like that. So we're doing that double pull-off. And that gets moved up to C. And then D. And you can see, I'm just using that finger to pick the high E string, just to get more attack out of it. Then it moves up to E. And then the last time, repeatedly bend the G string and change the note on the high E string. So you want to keep that bend held and keep it ringing. And this is sort of a pedal steel type lick where you can hear a repeated bend and then a note change on the other string. Back down to the A chord. All right, let's take this oblique bending technique one step further, where we're going to bend a note on the G string and hold it while we play a whole bunch of different fretted notes on the top two strings. This definitely takes a little practice and some fret hand strength to keep that note bent the whole time. But it's a cool lick, great technique, and also utilizes hybrid picking by using a finger pick on the higher strings to get the notes to jump out. Here it is. All right, we're in the key of A, and the riff is based on A minor pentatonic. And I'm beginning with that bend, the fourth up to the fifth on the G string. And you've got to hold that the whole time while barring across the top two strings at the fifth fret. And then I'm going to use the pinky to change the note on the B and the high E string. It's a little tough to keep that note bent the whole time, but here's what you do. So, I'm holding that bend and alternating So in the first bar, I go right from the G string to the B string, and then up. But in bar two, I go right to the high E string. So while holding this note, the G note with the pinky, I'm going to bend the fifth fret of the G string up a half step, but then switch from the B string to the high E string for a root note while still holding that C note on the G string that's been a half step. So and then you hear that minor third go up to the major third, and then you vibrato both of them. All right, now let's take this technique of bending the minor third up to the major third and sounding it in conjunction with the high root note. We're going to take that through a chord progression, moving from A to C to D up to E. Here it is. 1, 2, 3, and... All right, so I begin with the bend, but then I'm going to bar across the top two with the pinky. And again, using the finger to pick the high E string. And then I went, this is sort of pedal steel-like. And then I took that idea and I moved it up to C. And then over D, I just played the first part of the lick, and then the second part of the lick over E. And then I ended moving back to make reference to the D chord, and then to the A chord, but here, it's different intervallic pitches relative to the chord. When you do you're playing the minor to the major third and the root note of the appropriate chord. So that's E, D. But then to keep it closed, so the melody follows, we have the flat 5 over A, getting bent up to the 5th, and the major third on top. So that's just done for voice leading because it's the next double stop 6th in line relative to the A chord, moving from E to D to A. All right, the majority of the licks that I've been doing have been based on the blues scale or minor pentatonic. But a cool thing you can do is take the same licks and patterns, move them down 3 frets, a step and a half, and then it's going to be down. Those shapes are going to become A major, A minor pentatonic, you could take that and move it down 3 frets and you have A major pentatonic. So we can do a similar thing with the blues scale. Brings the flat 5 in. And we move that down 3 frets, make reference to A major pentatonic, but now we have a passing tone of the C note. So now let's take that oblique bending lick we played up here where we held a note on the G string and changed the note on the top 2 strings. And we're going to move that down to major pentatonic. Here it is. So now I have that bend, 4th fret, and I'm going to hold that. While I'm changing the notes on the top 2 strings. So you're going to bar across at the 2nd fret, and then the pinky's going to alternate on the 5th fret, or the B, or the high E string. Same type of lick, but using a major pentatonic there. All right, let's wrap up with a real banjo style lick. More oblique bends. And it also sort of emulates the sound of a pedal steel. It's a nice combination of all those different things. This, I guess, in a way, encapsulates country lead guitar. Is it borrows from the techniques of banjo and pedal steel and fiddle and the other typical country instruments, and comes up with sort of cool bastardized version that sounds neat because it's on the guitar. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to bend notes on the G string and then bar on the high E string and keep all 3 strings ringing the whole time, using a banjo roll type of picking pattern, just using the pick. Here it is. 1, 2, 3, and... So you can see I'm bending the G string and barring across the top 2 with the pinky. And I'm going to keep that pinky locked on there the whole time. And then you can see with the Pickin, it's going across 3rd, 2nd, 1st. And I'm going down, down, up. Now let's take this lick and we're going to move it down to G, and that allows us to use some open strings, which you will commonly hear bluegrass players do. But this nice bending sound is a great sound to do on country electric guitar. Here it is. 1, 2, 3, and... All right, because we're bending so low on the neck, I have to reinforce the bend with my index finger, and I'm bending with my middle finger while holding those top 2 strings. And I want all 3 strings to ring the whole time. So when I come down, I'm still keeping that pinky on top. And then the second time, I'm going to come down and you can hear all those strings ringing into each other. And then putting that low root note on the bottom with a little vibrato. As you can see, there's a lot of great techniques associated with country lead guitar styles. If this is a style that's new to you, there's so much to discover with oblique bends and finger picking and hybrid picking and different sounds. So try to listen to as many different guitar players as you can. Some of the guys I mentioned, like Roy Nichols, Roy Buchanan, Danny Gatton, and Brad Paisley. And you're going to hear a great variety of great guitar licks really